Alien girl shocked to find a human on spaceship. She now tries to hide him. The humming of the Yelari Veil's ion engines was a sound Kaerali Zyn had long since internalized, like the rhythmic beat of her own heart, constant and low beneath her boots as she made her rounds through the midnight corridors of the cruiser. The hall stretched wide and glowed in tones of violet and silver, polished metal reflecting her lavender-tinted skin and glinting off the insignia at her shoulder, the symbol of her lineage and command, though it often felt more like a brand than an honor. She had never asked to be the daughter of Fleet Admiral Yelari Zyn, but the universe rarely concerned itself with personal desires. Her shift was nearly over when a low-pitched chime from her console on the patrol drone flickered a crimson anomaly, a biosignature where none should be. Her brows furrowed. The Veil had not taken on new crew since leaving the outpost at Mersat 12, and all life signatures were catalogued and accounted for. She tapped the screen again, refining the scan. There it was, weak but undeniable, lodged somewhere deep in the cryo deck, hidden beneath layers of dampening field interference, as though something, or someone, were trying to avoid detection. Her pulse quickened. She could have alerted Central, command immediately, filed a report and let security protocols play out, but something in the way the reading flickered, erratic, vulnerable, almost like a failing heartbeat, made her hesitate. She disengaged from the patrol drone, boots whispering along the floor as she rerouted her course through auxiliary corridors, descending levels until the air grew colder and the lights dimmer in the direction of the cryo chambers, a region few visited unless responding to emergencies or preparing for deep space travel. The entry to the stasis chamber loomed ahead, sealed tight, and locked under Level 3 access. She keyed in her override code, hesitating only a moment before the doors hissed open, releasing a rush of chilled air that swept around her ankles and tangled with her breath. Inside, rows of cryopods lined the chamber like silver coffins, their control lights blinking in rhythm. Most were empty, unused, inert. Her scanner buzzed again, louder now, guiding her toward a corner alcove behind. The storage crates used for spare suit components and emergency coolant cells. She stepped around them cautiously and froze. There, nestled awkwardly between a fallen stasis container and the wall, was a figure, human, unmistakably so. Male, young, wrapped in a torn Earth Federation jacket smeared with dried blood and engine grease. His face pale and bruised, his lips slightly parted as he breathed in shallow gulps, unconscious but alive. Kaerali stared, unable to move as her mind reeled through possibilities. How had a human found his way aboard a Yelari fleet vessel? They had not been near Terran space for over a cycle. The last Earth vessel they'd passed was reported destroyed, in a pirate raid weeks ago. She knelt beside him, slowly examining the torn edge of his uniform, the dried crust of a wound near his hairline, the cold trembling in his fingers. He was clearly injured, likely in need of medical care, but his presence was a violation of every interstellar law the Yelari adhered to. Unauthorized biologicals aboard a military craft meant automatic containment and likely termination. Protocol was clear, and yet Kaerali could not bring herself to raise the comlink to her lips. The boy stirred, a soft groan escaping him, and his eyes fluttered open, startled, glassy blue, and utterly human. He tried to sit up but winced in pain. She reacted on instinct, placing a hand gently on his shoulder to steady him. "You need to stay still," she said, her voice calm but firm. His gaze found hers, confusion quickly replaced by fear, and he tried to push away. "Don't hurt me," he whispered, and the rawness in his voice, so sincere, so familiar, hit her harder than any training simulation ever had. She inhaled sharply. The human's condition was deteriorating. Her mind raced. If she alerted command now, he wouldn't survive the night. They would sedate him, strap him to an interrogation rig, and deconstruct his memories until nothing remained. It wasn't cruelty, Kaerali knew. It was protocol, precaution. But it didn't feel right. Not here. Not now. She reached into her supply pouch, pulled out a ration strip and a microheater, and placed them beside him. He blinked at her, wary, but hunger overcame hesitation. As he bit into the nutrient bar, chewing slowly, Kaerali's decision crystallized within her. She would not report him. Not yet. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way he clutched the food with hands that shook from more than cold. Maybe it was the scars along his collarbone, hinting at struggles no soldier should endure alone. Or maybe it was the look in his eyes, a kind of haunted hope, as though she were the last thing keeping him tethered to the edge of a great abyss. She helped him reposition behind the crate, covered him with an emergency blanket from a pod kit, and activated a localized thermal field to keep him stable. "You'll stay here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one knows about you, and it must stay that way." He nodded weakly, but didn't speak. She didn't even know his name. As she exited the chamber, resealing the doors, behind her, her heart pounded with a strange mixture of fear and something dangerously close to compassion. The moment she stepped into the upper corridor again, she was back to being Lieutenant Zyn, composed, efficient, and obedient. But something had changed. A line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. Back in her quarters, she reviewed the patrol logs and deleted any record of the anomaly. She rerouted her next shift to pass by the cryodeck again. For the first time since she'd donned her officer uniform, she would lie to her commanding officers. She would risk it all. Because somehow a human boy had ended up in her world, and now it seemed it was her responsibility to keep him hidden from the very people she had sworn loyalty to. As stars streaked past the ship's viewport and the void whispered secrets only the silence could hold, Kaerali knew the decision she had made would change everything, not just for her, but for the fragile, forbidden life trembling in the dark beneath her ship. For 3 cycles, Kaerali Zyn lived a double life aboard the Yelari Veil, one as an exemplary Zayari officer whose reports were always precise, whose shifts were never missed, and whose behavior was above suspicion, and another, secret and perilously unsanctioned life as the clandestine guardian of a human stowaway, hidden beneath layers of metal and protocol. Each day she navigated the sleek corridors of the ship with military grace, fulfilling her duties with unshakable focus, while each night she rerouted heat to the cryodeck's lower levels, diverted nutrient rations from supply drones, and modified surveillance loops with surgical precision to create narrow windows during which she could slip into the shadows and tend to the human she had no right to protect. His name, she had learned, was Leo Carter, 23 Terran cycles old junior systems technician for the Earth Federation's research vessel Ardent Voyager, a ship presumed destroyed after a pirate ambush in the forbidden Igron Belt. He, Idea, had survived only by luck and desperation, sealing himself in a malfunctioning escape pod that had drifted aimlessly until the Yelari Veil, sweeping for cosmic debris, had unknowingly pulled him into its lower decks with a salvage field. When he spoke of his ordeal, Kaerali listened in stunned silence, her mind struggling to reconcile the image of savage, impulsive humans preached by Sayari doctrine with the gentle, awkward, deeply scarred boy hiding in her ship's underbelly. He spoke not like a threat, but like someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. In return, Kaerali taught him the basic structure of the Zayari tongue, showed him how to operate emergency consoles in case she failed to return one night, and explained which patrol routes to avoid if he ever had to flee. Their meetings, though brief and laced with tension, grew longer as Leo's strength returned and his curiosity bloomed. He was fascinated by the alien technology, by the logic of their systems, and even more so by her. By the quiet way she moved, by the strange bioluminescence of her skin when she laughed, which he remarked was rare but worth chasing. She had never been one to laugh, but his words stayed with her, lingering like static on her skin. Still, she knew the danger was growing. Despite her best efforts, security protocols were not infallible, and Lieutenant Voren, a meticulous xenobiologist with a knack for suspicion and a particular distaste for Kaerali's rapid rise through the ranks, had begun to notice the anomalies. He requested access logs. He questioned her ration reports, and though she responded with careful precision, her every lie weighed heavier than the last. One misstep, and it would all come undone. Worse still, Leo had begun venturing short distances, beyond the cryo chamber during the ship's simulated sleep cycle, his curiosity outweighing caution. She found him once, crouched behind a panel near an engine relay, eyes wide at the pulse of power through the conduits. She had scolded him, her voice sharp with panic, but he had only smiled sheepishly and said, "I wanted to see what keeps this place breathing." She had almost shouted at him then, almost told him that one wrong step would get them both killed, but something in the way he looked at her, trusting, open, and somehow still hopeful, diffused her anger. Instead, she touched his shoulder and whispered, "You can't be seen, Leo, not by anyone, ever." He nodded solemnly. Yet deep down, Kaerali feared the moment was approaching when secrecy would no longer be enough. In the mess hall, her friends spoke of the fleet's increasing suspicion toward Terran vessels, of an unconfirmed report that Earth had developed new stealth technology. "If any human is found on board," one officer declared, "they'll extract its mind and vaporize the rest." The laughter that followed chilled her to her bones. That night, Leo asked her what would happen if he were discovered. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she brought him a pulse blanket modified to mask thermal signatures and said nothing as he wrapped it around himself. The silence between them said more than words could, but their careful balance was shattered too. Nights later, when Kaerali rerouted a maintenance drone from Deck 9 to cover her visit, only to find it reassigned by override, her heart sank. She returned to the cryo chamber to find Leo hidden, unharmed but clearly shaken. "Someone was here," he whispered. "They didn't see me, but they scanned the room." Her blood ran cold. The veil of secrecy was fraying. She instructed him to remain absolutely still, to not even breathe near a sensor line. And then she left, rushing straight into the one person she had hoped never to meet alone in such circumstances. Lieutenant Vorin, standing in the corridor, his eyes narrow and unreadable. "Odd that you're here so often, Lieutenant Zyn," he said. "No assigned personnel have business on Deck 9 without authorization." She replied with a neutral tone, citing technical inspections, minor faults, the usual blend of half-truths. He said nothing more, but the tension was palpable. She could feel it like a tightening noose. For the first time, she knew that her time was running out. Later, in the quiet safety of the cryo chamber, Leo looked at her with eyes that held more than just worry. "You don't have to keep doing this," he murmured. "You've already saved me." But Kaerali only shook her head, kneeling beside him. "I didn't save you, Leo," she said softly. "I delayed your execution." His laugh was small and humorless. "That's a hell of a romantic way to put it." She blinked. "Romantic? Never mind." He leaned his head back against the bulkhead, eyes flickering with exhaustion. "You're risking your life for me. I don't understand why." She hesitated. There were 1,000 reasons not to answer, and yet a single truth rose to her lips. "Because you shouldn't be here," she said slowly. "But you are. And the universe doesn't hand out chances like this for no reason." He didn't speak after that, but the silence between them shifted, becoming something softer, heavier. That night she stayed longer than she should have, watching him drift into a restless sleep, the tension carved into his features never fully fading. As she left the chamber and sealed it shut once again, Kaerali Zyn felt the first taste of inevitability, sharp, bitter, and undeniable. The secret she carried was no longer just a burden. It was a life. And the weight of it threatened to crush her. Kaerali Zyn had never before felt the full gravitational weight of choice press so tightly against her ribs, but now every breath she took was a negotiation between duty and something she had no word for, something fragile and treasonous, something that looked like the blue-eyed human hiding in the underbelly of a warship and breathed like defiance. She had lived her entire life by systems and codes, raised in a fleet family where every decision was a calculated step, in a legacy of logic, advancement, and loyalty to the Yelari Dominion, where sympathy was weakness and deviation from standard protocol meant career death, or worse. Yet here she was, moving like a shadow through sectors of the Yelari Veil that no officer should frequent so often, splicing access codes and falsifying maintenance reports with the kind of precision that could only come from fear sharpened into determination, hiding Leo Carter not only from her superiors but from a machine, because the ship itself was starting to notice. It began with inconsistencies in the auto-maintenance logs and erratic thermal readings in Cryosector 9, anomalies that the AI core, Ardenton, flagged with increasing frequency. Kaerali had managed to delay a full diagnostic sweep twice already, claiming it was interfering with her manual assessments, but she knew she couldn't keep this up for long. Worse, Leo had developed a dry cough and a slight fever, likely from long-term exposure to suboptimal conditions, and she lacked the proper tools to treat him fully without raising suspicion from medical. She administered protein bombs and hydration, patches scavenged from unused storage, but his condition worried her more than she let on. "I'm fine," he insisted one night, voice hoarse but eyes still teasing. "I've had worse hangovers." She didn't know what a hangover was, but she smiled anyway, thin and tired. "If your lungs collapse, I doubt a Terran joke will fix them," she murmured. He smirked. "Then I'll just keep breathing for your sake." She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust a cooling coil, because the weight in her chest was too sudden, too real. Something had changed between them. It wasn't spoken, but it was there in the way his gaze lingered on her when she wasn't looking, and the way her steps unconsciously slowed every time she approached the cryo deck, heart already anticipating the warm spark of his presence. She had told herself it was pity once, then obligation, then guilt, but none of those things made her skin burn the way his smile did, and that terrified her. The next evening, as she returned from a training drill simulation, her console pinged, with a flagged report, an internal query by Lieutenant Voren requesting an unscheduled sweep of Deck 9 based on continued subthermal discrepancies and unaccounted movement patterns. Her blood went cold. The request had not been approved yet, but it was only a matter of time. She had to act. She rerouted auxiliary power to stall the sweep, then made her way to the cryo deck under the pretense of a coolant leak. Leo was awake, sitting cross-legged and reading a portable Yelari interface she'd given him days ago to keep his mind busy. His eyes lit up when he saw her, but the look on her face silenced him immediately. "We're out of time," she said, kneeling in front of him. "They're coming, not yet, but soon. I can't stop it again." He blinked, the color draining from his face. "So what happens now?" "You run," she said, and the word felt like acid on her tongue. "There's an emergency pod docked under subsector G. It's meant for tech engineers. It's small, not tracked by long-range scans. If you use the maintenance tunnel, you can reach it without tripping main sensors." He shook his head. "No, I can't leave you here to face the fallout alone." She gripped his wrist. "You don't have a choice. If they find you here, you'll be dissected, and I'll be stripped of rank and branded a traitor. Do you understand what that means?" "I understand exactly what it means," he said, voice low and steady. "It means we're already in this together." She stared at him, heart pounding. There was no calculation, no strategy left, just fear and something deeper, something dangerous. "Leo," she whispered. He reached up and brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I don't want to go, but I don't want you destroyed either." She leaned into his touch for a fraction of a second, then pulled away, forcing her professional mask back over her features. "You'll go. You'll wait until I send the all-clear signal. Then you'll launch. Do not look back." He opened his mouth, but she shook her head. "Please." That one word broke him. He nodded. "Okay." Together they packed the emergency satchel, hydration packs, nutrient gels, a pulse beacon, and a modified cloaking mesh she had stolen from a stealth drone the week before. Every second she spent beside him felt like a countdown toward the end of something she hadn't even realized had begun. When it was time, she led him through the crawl space that connected to the maintenance tunnel, her breath tight, her hands trembling. At the threshold, he turned and pulled her into a fierce, desperate embrace. "I'll find a way to contact you," he said, lips brushing her temple. "You saved my life, Kaerali." She closed her eyes. "Just stay alive, Leo. That's enough." He disappeared into the tunnel like a ghost, and she resealed the panel with shaking fingers. That night, the sweep occurred. Vorin led the charge, flanked by 2 security enforcers and a scanning unit. Kaerali was summoned to assist, her demeanor flawless, her lies airtight. They found nothing. The cryodeck was cold and silent. Were the scanners returned null? Vorin frowned but could prove nothing. Still too many inconsistencies, he muttered. The logs say you were here again last cycle. Standard atmospheric check, Kaerali replied smoothly. Faulty insulation in pod 17B. He scowled. I'll be watching, Zyn. Of course, she said. You always are. After they left, she collapsed in her quarters, finally allowing her tears to fall in silence. For days, she waited for Leo's signal. None came. She told herself that meant he had made it to safety, that the cloaking mesh was working, that he was alive. But the silence grew heavier with each passing cycle, until it wrapped around her like a second skin. Her performance remained perfect. Her heart did not. Then, 1 cycle later, she received a private, encrypted message embedded within a fake, diagnostic alert. A Terran symbol, a simple drawing of a star cradled between 2 hands. Her breath caught. It was their signal. He was alive. Somewhere out there in the cold, vast dark, the human boy she had hidden was still breathing. And, still thinking of her. Time passed, but it did not pass gently. The days aboard the Yelari Veil blurred into one another, a cycle of motion and stillness, of silence that screamed and duty that no longer felt like honor. Kaerali Zyn resumed her station, resumed her tasks, resumed the face she wore for the rest of the crew. Alert, loyal, efficient. But the skin underneath that mask had changed. Something in her had cracked open, and no matter how tightly she tried to seal it, the fracture pulsed like a heartbeat. She went through the routines, every step mechanical, every word measured, every breath a quiet reminder that she had done something unforgivable by Yelari law. She had harbored a human, lied to her command, sabotaged her ship's systems, and, though she never said it aloud, even now she would do it again. The message from Leo haunted her not with pain but with hope, and hope was more dangerous than grief. Grief you could bury. Hope kept returning. Each night she traced the symbol he had sent, a star and 2 cupped hands, into the fog on her mirror, into the condensation on the airlock wall, even into the palm of her own hand when the lights dimmed and she needed to feel something real. The encryption he used was Terran, embedded within ship diagnostics only she monitored, and though it was primitive by Yelari standards, it was just clever enough to slip through unnoticed. He sent no words, only symbols. Some were simple, a comet, a shield, a flame, and others she had to interpret like riddles. But every message reminded her that he was out there, surviving, adapting, becoming more than the lost boy she'd hidden in the dark. In return, she sent back brief fragments, a location ping with a 3-second burst, a wave signature from a nearby comet, a coded signal buried in starpath reports. They weren't instructions, they were echoes, signs that she remembered, that she still believed. She learned to move carefully, more carefully than ever, because Vorin hadn't stopped watching her. He had transferred to a different post after failing to catch her in the act, but before he left, he filed an anonymous warning to Central Command that Kaerali Zyn might be compromised. The report was flagged but unproven, and she knew it still, sat in some queue waiting for review. If it ever rose to the surface, her past actions could unravel in a matter of hours. So she trained harder, volunteered for high-risk away missions, submitted reports so flawless they bordered on obsessive. She became the very model of discipline, the kind of officer they couldn't afford to lose. And all the while, she traced his signs in the stars. Then came the news. Earth was accelerating diplomatic contact. A neutral envoy had been proposed, and one Yelari cruiser was to escort the delegation to a meeting point near the broken moons of Drail Sector. The Yelari Veil had been chosen. Kaerali's heart thundered in her chest when she read the orders. Not because of the mission, but because of the coordinates. Drail sector was unremarkable to most, but she remembered the old star maps Leo had studied when he first arrived, one of the few sectors he'd shown specific interest in. My uncle used to say, he'd murmured, that the broken moons were once a single world that loved itself too hard and shattered from the pressure. She hadn't understood the metaphor then, but now she felt it deep in her marrow. Could it be coincidence? Could he be waiting there? Or was she reading too much into the cosmos, the way desperate hearts did when reality offered no answers? Regardless, she volunteered to lead the systems prep team, ensuring she'd be on the bridge during the rendezvous. The days leading to departure were agonizing. She reread every signal he'd sent, cross-referenced every star path he might have taken, and prayed, not to any god, because the Yelari had no gods, but to the silence itself, hoping it would carry her longing into the void. When the ship arrived, in Drail sector, it felt like arriving in a memory. The moon spun slowly across a canvas of shattered ice and veiled light, their broken bodies reflecting fragments of 1,000 lives lost to time. The Terran vessel approached 2 hours later, a diplomatic ship, unarmed and sleek, flanked by 2 minor escorts. Protocol dictated a formal welcome, and Kaerali stood among the bridge crew as the Terran representatives appeared on the comms screen. There were 3 of them, but her eyes found him immediately. Leo Carter, standing not as a stowaway this time, but as an official liaison. His hair was shorter now, uniform crisp, expression composed, but his eyes found hers across the stars, and in that one shared glance, everything unraveled. The call proceeded with all the stiffness expected of diplomacy, but beneath it flowed an undercurrent Kaerali could barely contain. He spoke clearly, respectfully, but every word he said was a code only she could read. When the feed ended, she requested to be part of the inspection detail for the delegation transfer. Her commanding officer raised an eyebrow but granted permission. Her record made her a safe choice. As she boarded the Terran ship with the other Yelari, her pulse threatened to shake her apart. She moved with professional grace, but every corridor felt like a path back to something buried. When she saw him again, not through glass, but in person, she nearly lost her composure. He stood in a corridor corner, flanked by Terran officers, nodding respectfully to the Yelari team. Then, with a pretext as thin as a breath, he motioned to her and said, "Lieutenant Zyn, I believe we have a systems calibration issue in the auxiliary nav." "Of course," she replied, voice neutral. The others moved on. He led her into a small console room and locked the door behind them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he whispered, "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." She stared at him, heart in her throat. "I wasn't sure you made it." "I almost didn't," he said, "but I knew you'd keep watching the stars." She stepped closer. "You're part of the envoy?" "Advisor. I pushed hard to get this assignment." His voice dropped. "I had to see you." The air between them thickened. Every emotion she had buried surged to the surface, colliding with memory, fear, longing. "If they find out," she began. "They won't," he interrupted. "This room's unmonitored during standby. We've got 6 minutes." She laughed softly, the sound brittle with disbelief. "You risked interstellar war for 6 minutes?" He grinned. "I'd risk a universe for 1 more second with you." Her breath caught. She reached out, fingers brushing his arm, grounding herself in the truth of him. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked at her with that same raw honesty that had undone her in the cryo deck. "We finish this mission, then I get transferred to the neutral embassy, and if you can, someday, transfer there too." She shook her head. "You're talking about a future that doesn't exist yet." "Then let's build it," he whispered, 1 second at a time. They didn't kiss. There wasn't time. But when they parted, her fingers lingered in his. It was a promise without words. That night, back aboard the Yelari Veil, Kaerali Zyn stood by the viewport, watching the Terran ship drift alongside theirs in cautious formation. She didn't know what the future held, what wars might ignite, what laws might rise to crush them. But she knew this. Somewhere in the quiet dark, a boy she once saved had saved her right back. And in a galaxy that feared everything human, she had found the only soul who ever looked at her and saw more than alien. He saw her. That would be enough. For now.